I'm Mrs. Bowen from the 5th grade, and I will be reading Chapter 7, Imminent Extermination. The gold-hilted sword shimmered in the morning light as George swiped the air with the weapon. The knight went through a series of attack motions, then stopped, a bit winded, and grinned at Kenny. The Riverstone stomachache finally pushed the breath out of the boy. Dizzy and lightheaded, he dropped his mug on the chessboard, drowning the pieces in a fizzy brown deluge. In a blink, George dropped the sword and caught Kenny as the lad was about to topple backward off his stool. "Little squire," he cried as he helped Kenny up, "are you okay?" The young rabbit caught his breath, and his eyes slowly focused on the kindly, brave face of George. This codger was certainly not at all what he expected. He was a knight, a royal guardsman, and a dragon slayer. And if the stories George had shared with him over the years were even half true, then he had to warn Graham. Immediately. "I've got to go," Kenny said as he headed for the door. The knight stopped him. "But you just got here. Are you okay? Is it—" George paused, kneeling down to look the lad in the eyes. "Are you worried about me?" "Because you don't have to be, son. Once I get suited up and on that hilltop, this monster will be slain in moments. I know how to handle these devils. You can even watch or help if your parents allow it." It was too much for the lad. Kenny dashed out of the shop without even a goodbye. He pedaled as fast as his legs could go from the center of town. His mind was so full of worry that he didn't even notice that the crowd was now much larger than it had been previously. In fact, villagers were lining up on either side of the street. George had been his hope, his only hope, of figuring out what to do with the dragon. If there was anyone in the village, outside of his family, who would understand Graham wasn't a threat, it would have been George. And now he was preparing to come up and slay his best friend, and with orders from the king himself. How could he not follow them? Then his mind flashed to the newspaper headline and what the paperboy had said. Was this mess somehow all his fault? Had he verified old Pop's story by declaring what a real dragon was like during his book report? As he pedaled even faster, the gears in Kenny's mind clicked and whirred, trying to find a solution for his friend. "Perhaps Graham could hide out in his cave for a little while until this blows over," he said, thinking out loud. "I bet Mom and Dad would let him live in our barn if he had to, even though it is a little tight." He was almost to the top of Shepherd's Hill now. "Graham will know what to do," he said as he hopped off his bike. He found the dragon examining himself in an old full-length mirror, rubbing something onto his skin with a tattered flannel shirt. "Kenny, have a look at this," he said, with that familiar toothy grin. "Your mom gave me some floor wax that polishes my scales up nicely. Look at this sheen. It really brings out the iridescence in my complexion." Kenny was panting, completely out of breath. "Graham, you have to go. George is coming to fight you." "George is coming to what? Why? What's he upset upset with me for? I didn't damage one single page of his books. Okay, well, I did scorch the cover of that silly bestiary a little, but it totally had me in stitches. Honestly, I don't know where some writers get their crazy ideas from. A camel-lopered of all the... Graham, Kenny interrupted. He's a knight, a dragon slayer who works for the king. The drake hissed, looked at the young rabbit for a second, then resumed polishing his scales, though in a much more frenetic fashion. I thought he was your friend. I thought we had a lot in common, a fellow book lover, a fellow connoisseur of the finer things in life, not some courtly bane sent for my imminent extermination. He threw the rag down on the ground, walked toward his cave entrance, and began tidying. He's not like that, Kenny squeaked as he followed the dragon. Kindly old George had been his friend for as long as he could remember. He's a good guy. He taught me how to play chess, and he introduced me to all these good books we've been enjoying. The dragon kept his back turned to the lad. Kenny's heart started beating faster and faster. What are we going to do? He asked. I am not going to do anything, the dragon replied in an icy tone. As I told you before, that was the sport of all my brethren, not me. That's why I am still here today, and they are all gone. Slain by knights like your good friend George. You tell him there will be no battle between us. No bloody Roman holiday. I won't have it. He has orders from the king himself, Kenny pleaded, and the whole town is gathering together for this. King Schming, Graham turned to face the boy. His eyes were glowing and wisps of smoke were rising out of his nostrils. What does he know? When was the last time he sat down and talked to a dragon? Instead, the cadger sends some carking varlet up here to do the dirty deed without even a hello. How are you today? Mind if I cut your throat? Graham calmed down, picked up his rag, and began polishing himself again. Now, if George